Hey, my name is Drew. Welcome to Overlake Student Ministries. We are creating a safe place where every student is loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Hey, I'm Will, and here at SM, we make sure that every student is loved, known, heard, supported, and challenged.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to Group Life. My name is James.
I'm Jody, and tonight we're in week 3 of our Do Something series, and I'm so excited because we are going to hear from one of our very favorite humans of all time, and that is Josh McQueen.
Josh McQueen. So get ready. Whenever you start to see his face, give him some love, shout him out. Maybe he's even in the room. And right before Josh comes up, Jody and I have a big announcement for you. We have been holding on to, waiting for. So stay tuned, get ready, and see what we got going on.
Okay, you guys, you are going to want to save the dates. If you have not heard yet, we are having our SM summer experience for MSM and HSM July 23rd through the 25th. We cannot wait. It's going to be epic.
It's going to be amazing. I am stoked about it. You are going to want to register right now. Registration is open on occsm.org. You can find it there. All of the information that you need, all of the details, register there. Also, the early bird date for registration is cheaper, maybe that means you'll have more fun, is June 2nd. So register by June 2nd, which is our last Group Life, and it will be so awesome to see you there, friends.
Invite your friends. We cannot wait to spend an entire weekend together this summer.
It's gonna be awesome. Take care and enjoy Josh McQueen.
Well, hello, MSM and HSM. It's great to be with you as we continue our series called Do Something. Let me ask you as we're getting started, have you ever noticed how almost everything we buy these days has a warning label? Sometimes maybe they're helpful, but most times if you actually read those things, you're thinking, who is this for? Are people really this ridiculous? But I guess if they had to put a label on it, someone must have done it at some point. Here's what I mean. Here's a label from a kid's shirt. Wash inside out. Remove child before washing. And this one, it's for an iron-on patch. Caution, this activity involves using a hot iron. Do not iron while wearing shirt. Okay, really? Wow. Let's talk about a different kind of warning. In the Old Testament, the first part of the Bible before Jesus arrives on earth, there was a group of prophets who had all kinds of warnings for God's people because they were getting off track, and most of their warnings had to do with injustice. And we'll come back to that in just a minute. In this series called Do Something, we're talking about injustice. Now, if justice is something right, fair, or equal, then injustice is the opposite of that. So when we're talking about injustice, we're talking about things in our world that are not right, not fair, not equal. In our first week, we talked about seeing injustice. Maybe you see an injustice in the world and you wonder things like, why would that person say that? How could someone do that to someone else? Or why isn't anyone doing something about it? Or maybe you've asked the really hard question when it comes to injustice, a question that feels so difficult to answer. Why isn't God doing something about this? That's a fair question, and it's not wrong to ask that. Thankfully, we don't have to guess or assume where God is in the midst of all this. We don't have to guess what God is really like or if He really cares. We can look at His Son, Jesus, who is the best way for us as humans to see what God is really like. Several people who knew Jesus personally hung out with Him, took the time to write down what they saw and heard so that people like you and me, the ones who didn't get to see it with their own eyes, would know what happened. They had something to say about this. And today we're going to look at the eyewitness account of Matthew. a book that was written by one of Jesus' closest followers and friends. And Matthew took the time to write down something important that he observed. Here's what he said. This is Matthew chapter 9, verse 35. Jesus traveled through all the towns and villages of that area, teaching in the synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom. And he healed every kind of disease and illness. Jesus was teaching, healing, and helping people as he shared the message of what God's kingdom is really like. He talked about things like the outcast being loved, the slaves being freed, the oppressed being rescued, the hungry being fed. In other words, he's talking about justice. Everywhere he went, Jesus had something to say and also do about people being treated unfairly or in a way that wasn't right. Matthew continues in verse 36. When he, Jesus, saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were confused and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus modeled for us what God is really like when it comes to injustice. First, Jesus saw. He saw the injustice, the hurt, and the brokenness. And when he saw, Jesus cared. That's what compassion is. So if you've ever wondered, God is for justice. In fact, thousands of years earlier, he said so through the prophet Isaiah, one of those prophets that I was talking about earlier. In the book of Isaiah, the Lord says this, "For I, the Lord, love justice." So we know that God loves justice, but that still doesn't answer the question, why doesn't he do something about the injustices we see around us today? Couldn't he just perform a miracle like in the time of Jesus and make it all disappear? Matthew gives us a clue about the answer to these questions in the next verse. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "The harvest is great, but the workers are few." This is a farming illustration, and most of us don't live on farms, but basically Jesus is saying, you're wondering what my plan to deal with injustice is? It's you. We need more workers to bring my plans for healing and change and justice into this world. More workers like you. I remember a time when this truth became real to me. I saw an example of injustice that made me really sad and also really angry at the same time. I was on a mission trip with a team from our church. We were in Cape Town, South Africa, which is a city at the very bottom edge of the continent of Africa. Our team was visiting what is known as an informal settlement. The negative term for these places is slum. Here are a few pictures. These places are prone to flooding because these communities don't have the resources to install good drainage systems, and also prone to fires because so many homes are packed into these really small areas. And these are very, very poor communities. So as you can imagine, life is pretty tough in these settlements or slums. We were going door to door offering medical care to people in their homes with a couple of nurses. And we came to a road in the settlement that was a little higher up, and so I could see out from the settlement. And on the hillsides above, on this side and on that side, were these gated communities, like beautiful communities with mansion-like homes. And those communities were mostly wealthy white South Africans. And most of the people living in the slums we were in, and most of the slums throughout the country, were black South Africans. Now, there's a long story in the history of South Africa that has to do with a thing called apartheid, which was a terrible form of injustice toward black South Africans. And I don't have the time to tell you that whole story, but what I was seeing was the result of that. Economic inequality, disparity, injustice that had resulted from a long history of injustice. And I was thinking to myself, the children running around in this slum are no less loved by God and no less human than the children up there in the gated community. And yet the reality could not be more opposite. And I remember sobbing that night as I was laying in bed because I was so full of sadness and so full of anger at what I'd seen. Do you remember a time when you saw some kind of injustice taking place? Maybe you were on a mission trip and saw something similar to what I did. Or maybe you were at school and you heard someone making fun of someone because of the color of their skin. Or maybe you overheard someone making fun of a person who has disabilities. If you can't recall ever seeing injustice, all you have to do is actually go to a news website and read for a few minutes, and you'll see articles about injustice taking place all over the world. So let me ask you, if you have seen or read about an example of injustice, what did you feel? It's important to pay attention to your emotions. We learned that earlier this year in Group Life. God sometimes speaks to us through our emotions. Maybe you've seen an example of economic injustice, poverty of some kind, and you felt incredible sadness. Maybe you even cried. Or maybe you've seen a form of racism and it made you really angry. Pay attention to those emotions. It could be God calling you, not just to feel something about that issue, but to find a way to do something about it. I want to close with 3 challenges that sum up what I've talked about. Number 1, pay attention to the injustice around you. This is similar to what we talked about last Wednesday, but it bears repeating. Maybe there's injustice in your neighborhood, your city, your school, and there's certainly injustice in the world. Like I said, all you need to do is look at the news for 5 minutes. And then number 2, pay attention to the emotions you feel about that injustice. What issues in our world make you angry? What issues make you sad? Leaders, be sure to ask your students those questions tonight when we break into small groups. And then number 3, find a way to join in God's work for justice. God is already at work in these places of injustice. We simply need to join in. If the issue of homelessness makes you sad, God is at work in our safe parking program here at OCC, where we help people who are living in their cars because they don't have homes. Or maybe the issue of human trafficking makes you angry. God is at work through ministries that we partner with in Thailand to end trafficking. You could be a part of a mission trip and teams that are making a difference there. So step up, serve, give your time, give your energy, give your money. Take the skills, personality, and resources that God has given you and find ways to use them to help bring justice to the injustices that God has shown you. As you head to your small groups, think about these questions and talk as a group about how you can do something about injustice.